Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fifth in our webinar series. This week, we're talking immigration. So I want to welcome everyone. Again, I'm John Newstreet, President and CEO of the Kissimmee, Osceola County Chamber of Commerce. Our mission statement here is to be champions for business and community. And so immigration certainly falls into that realm. As a reference, this being our fifth series, we have all five of these will be archived here on our Facebook page as well as our website and a YouTube page that we have. There are also a tremendous amount more resources related to COVID-19 on our website. That's KissimmeeChamber.com. Again, today we examine the topic of immigration. With President Trump's executive order last week, we will discuss implications toward business, especially E-2 business visa holders. And we'll learn a little bit more about E-2 if you're not familiar, but we're joined by real experts today, and so if we can pull them up, I'll do a quick introduction and some background. We have Mr. Demian Serianni. He's an attorney at Widerman Malek. His area of practice is immigration. His education background is Regent University School of Law in Virginia Beach and Niagara University in Niagara Falls, New York, a BS in criminology and criminal justice, magna cum laude. Smart. There's additional background, including the fact that he practices United States immigration and nationality law in select areas of Florida law. And he is a former immigration inspector with the Legacy INS, which is now CBS, or CBP, excuse me. We're also joined by Steve Silcock. Steve is our former and soon to be again area council chairman in the Four Corners Area Council. He's a real estate professional with Bardell Real Estate. And he's a true leader for the E2 cause, not only locally, but really nationally. And so I have some background. Before joining the chamber, I worked in federal elected office and for a few of our U.S. senators and worked through the immigration. And so Steve works closely with a woman named Zoe Adam, who I got to know very well as we talked those immigration matters. And it really is quite I don't know, Steve, there's probably not a good word to use about the situation you're in, but certainly the president's executive order complicates that. So if I may, I'll turn it over to Steve for maybe some additional background introduction, and the show is yours, and then we'll talk to Demian in just a little bit.
Thank you, John. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? I'll take you there. Yes, you can hear me. Okay. Before we start, I'd just like to say a big thank you to John, Christina, and all the chamber staff for their continued support and leadership during what we all know to be extremely difficult times. It's really appreciated, John. Thank you for what you do. Well, my name is Steve Silcock. I'm the broker and owner of Bardell Real Estate. Now, fortunately, real estate is an essential service, so we are still able to work at this time, although we do things a little differently in what's best described as a very challenging market. Now, Damian's going to go through the recent executive orders regarding immigration, green cards in more detail, but I wanted to open things up by focusing on a specific issue that impacts a number of business owners, both here in Central Florida and across the US. Now, I came to Florida 15 years ago on an E2 treaty investment visa. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, E2 is an investment visa. Like many investors on E2, I moved my family from another country, put my life savings into a business, and all with that desire to live the American dream. And although there's no official data out there available to tell us exactly how many, we believe there to be around 100,000 E2 treaty investor businesses in the United States. And we estimate from these E2 business owners, we're looking at an initial investment of around 27 billion. When we get to employment, we're looking at job creation somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million jobs. In terms of sales, it's annual turnover in excess of $100 billion. And wages, we have a combined payroll of over $3.7 billion each year. And so, it's not insignificant in terms of economic impact. Now, as E2 business owners, we invest in a business. We create employment, we pay our taxes, and on the whole, are contributing members of society. And I'm sure you're all thinking, well, that's great, but we do face a number of significant challenges. Our E2 visas have to be renewed, maximum 5 years. So every 5 years, we leave the country to go to a US embassy to get authorization to come back to the US and continue managing our businesses, employing people, and paying our taxes. It's beyond inconvenient, but we have lots of other challenges to go with it. For our children, when they reach 21, they have to leave the country and go home. Now, my daughter's 16. We brought her here when she was 1. She'll have lived here for 20 years. This is her home. E2 business owners cannot homestead property. Our driving licenses are stamped temporary, and we have to renew them at best, every 2 years. Now, when we talk to people, including our elected officials, we often hear that, well, that just doesn't make sense. Just get a green card. And I really, really wish it was that easy. There is no pathway to a green card for E2 treaty investor visa holders. And our children are specifically excluded from DACA legislation because we brought them to the US legally. Now, there are so many of the challenges we face day to day, but the recent executive orders and the challenges created just by COVID-19 really brought things to a head. I don't have time to go through the stimulus programs such as PPP, other than to say that when the forms were first released by the SBA, they specifically prevented E2 business owners from submitting an application. That was leaving 1 million employees facing redundancy, even though we've paid all our taxes, and I'm sure that's another webinar, John. We can do that one day. But I'll go back to immigration. A good friend of mine is also a Brit and an E2 business owner. And some of you may know Kevin Jowett at Revolution Adventures. It's an off-road attraction on State Road 33. Now, Kevin flew to the UK on Saturday, the 14th of March, as part of the Visit Orlando Roadshow. Went on his own dollar to promote Orlando and the surrounding area. He had his visa renewal the following Friday. On the Monday after he arrived, the Visit Orlando Roadshow was cancelled, and we started hearing about the travel bans and the executive orders. Things move forward. His appointment at the embassy is cancelled, gets moved to April the 22nd. The embassies are closed. It's now 28th of April. The embassies are still closed. There's still no appointments, and he's stuck over there in the UK. So ignoring practical things like the UK is on lockdown, there are no hotels open, so don't know where he stays, sleep in his car, sleep on the streets. But due to the executive orders of the travel restrictions and his visa, he's unable to return to his wife, who's still here in Florida, his business, and has had to make 15 employees redundant. Only got 5 minutes, and I tried to create an end for this short presentation, but there are so many issues and so many people with similar stories. There really isn't an end, but perhaps we can see this as a beginning. Now, we have a bill in Congress at the moment, HR 2124. It's the E2 Visa Improvement Act, but it needs support. If you're an E2 business owner, or you know someone E2, or you just want to know how you could possibly help, please contact either myself or Zoe Adams at E2 Visa Reform. Christina, if you could pop that slide up, I'd appreciate it. Okay, the contact information is there. I'll post it in the feed as we come out of that. But we'd love to hear from you. And John, I think that's my 5 minutes, so I'm going to bail on that and look forward to listening to Demian.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Steve. Steve, for clarification, before we go to Demian for kind of the overview of all of this, and I should have brought Demian up first. That's my mistake, even with our practice in the green room. But just so to be an E2 visa holder, you have to be a business owner. Is that correct?
Yeah, I will. What I should have started with, John, was I'm not an attorney. I cannot give legal advice. Okay, but yes, E2 it's an investment visa for a business owner. You need to have a controlling interest in the business that you purchase, and you need to invest your own capital.
And so I bring that up both because that's a powerful point, but also because the chamber doesn't talk a lot of immigration. It's an emotional topic. There's a lot of angles to a tremendous amount of angles, but E2 means you're a business owner. You yourself are a chamber member. We have several chamber members that are E2 visa holders. This impacts you and those across the country. That's why it's important to us. And so I wanted to have this discussion. So I just wanted to make that point very clear, and I appreciate that.
No, I appreciate it, John. Without our visa, we have no right to be in the country. We have to leave.
After what, 6 months, like a visitor, right? So
yeah, just like a visitor.
Right. Very good. Christine, if we can bring up Demian, and again, I'll offer my apologies to Demian. I think we were going to lead with you, and then I pulled a fast one on everybody. So my apologies. But You've heard what Steve shared and are familiar with the example he gave. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you walk through maybe
Okay.
whatever you want to share to the audience on the executive order, on immigration in general, and maybe Kevin's case and Steve's example.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, first, I'd like to thank the Chamber, thank John and Christina for the invite to speak today. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. So I've been practicing immigration law in Central Florida since 2002. I've had an office in Celebration since 2005. And just to start out, I'd like to discuss or add to Steve's comments regarding the E2 treaty investor visa. I have had many clients within the past couple decades that have been in the same situation as Steve. And certainly it's heartbreaking to know that they've put their life savings and efforts into creating a business here in the United States, raising their families here, and then to have to go through certain hurdles to remain here or to keep their children here once they turn 21. So just to touch on that, an E2 treaty investor visa is basically available to citizens of countries that have an economic treaty with the United States. I think there's only about 35 or 40 countries, somewhere approximately in that range, that have treaties with the U.S. So not everybody's eligible for that E2 treaty, but the requirements are very rigid. Certainly, one of the main requirements is that the applicant or foreign national investor does have to make a substantial investment in the United States. And substantial is not really defined in the regulations, but I can say that most E2 investors are investing, I would say 100,000 on average up into, many hundreds of thousands and possibly even into the millions. And that in and of itself does not give them an option to obtain lawful residence, or what most people refer to as a green card for the U.S. So certainly that's an issue. I am a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, otherwise known as AILA, and AILA has been pushing for a change to the E2 regulations to allow a pathway to a green card for quite a few decades. So we'll continue our efforts and hope that in the future or near future, Congress will make some changes to the E2 treaty investor classification. So with that said, I'd like to just touch on the two main topics of the presidential order that was recently signed, and also the effects of COVID-19 on immigration and the effects on businesses and companies here in the United States. So to start out, the presidential executive order basically suspends the entry of immigrants into the U.S. for a 60-day period. And it's important to understand which foreign nationals will be affected by this. So the order is specifically targeting immigrants. Most foreign nationals who travel to the United States can be separated into two categories: non-immigrant or immigrant. Non-immigrant classifications include visitors, foreign students, E2 treaty investors such as Steve, diplomats, vocational students, religious workers, and so on. So there's a lot of different non-immigrant classifications, and they are not affected by this executive order per se. The executive order is really focused on preventing immigrants from entering for 60 days with certain exceptions. So the main exception is that spouses and minor children of U.S. citizens will not be affected. They will remain able to immigrate or process an immigrant visa through a U.S. embassy to enter the United States. Now, all of the other immigrant classifications, including both family and employment-based, will be affected by the 60-day suspension. So what that does is simply delay anyone in those categories by at least 60 days. So with that said, it's also important to look at the effect that COVID-19 had on immigration, which in my mind has had more of an effect recently than the presidential order or immigration ban. So due to COVID-19, the quarantines, the travel restrictions, most immigration-related offices have been and will continue to be closed until some point in the future. For example, all of the U.S. embassies and consulates around the world have been closed since mid-March, so a month and a half at this point. And what that means is that any foreign national, whether a non-immigrant or an immigrant who is overseas and needs to apply for a U.S. visa to enter the United States to live and work or carry out their tasks, they're unable to process visas until the offices reopen. And at this point in time, we're not exactly sure. We're hoping that beginning in May, mid-May, hopefully the embassies and consulates will reopen and continue to accept and interview both non-immigrant and immigrant visa cases. So if you add the situation that the embassies and consulates have been closed for a month and a half, you add the 60 days for immigrant cases, you're already up to almost a half a year, 4 months possibly, of delays in people getting back to the United States. So as John pointed out, even though the executive order doesn't bar or ban non-immigrants from entering the United States, if those non-immigrants don't already have a stamped visa in their passport, then they're not going to be able to enter the United States anyways. So John's friend he mentioned, who got stuck during the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, is stuck because the embassies and consulates have been closed. And certainly that's a main issue. Some of the other issues or effects of COVID-19 is that USCIS has suspended their premium processing service. Premium processing is an option for processing immigrant petitions in a fast track system. So basically for petitioners who file petitions for certain types of immigration benefits with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services here in the United States, if they pay an extra filing fee, submit an extra form, those petitions can be processed within 15 calendar days. That is currently suspended by USCIS due to COVID-19. And of course, that has a major impact on the availability of foreign workers to bring foreign workers over here for U.S. businesses and companies. So for example, just before COVID struck the United States, we had an EB-1A case, which is an immigrant-based employment visa for a person with extraordinary ability. And our law firm filed that case using USCIS premium processing, and we were able to get a decision within 7 days, which is great. Now, without premium processing, that case petition probably would have taken upwards of 6 months or longer to be adjudicated and processed, which is step one. And then step two, if that immigrant is overseas, then they would be affected by the new presidential executive order or ban, and they'd have to wait an additional 60 days minimum before they could process an immigrant visa at the U.S. Embassy. So certainly, the number one effect of COVID-19 and of the executive order is that it's delaying pretty much every type of immigration case with a few exceptions. The exceptions would be foreign nationals who are already here in the United States, who already had petitions or applications pending with USCIS, and who are not required to appear for an in-person interview at a local USCIS office. For those people, their cases are still being processed, and they can still receive their approvals and their status extensions or change of status extensions here in the United States. So there are certain foreign nationals, non-immigrants, and immigrants who aren't affected. But certainly for anyone who's outside the United States, they're going to expect and see, great delays in processing their visa and getting over to the U.S. So with that said, in response to the president's immigration ban, as I mentioned before, I'm a member of AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association. AILA, along with a few other organizations, has already filed a temporary restraining order against the ban, and that is set for hearing, I think, this Friday. So certainly we're hoping in federal court that the temporary restraining order will be issued and maybe a way to stop that executive order and that ban from taking effect here in the United States. So with that said,
Demian, if I can real quick, just to the audience, we're getting a lot of comments in the thread. Some people who are following us closely, you're sharing some great information. If any of the folks watching, and I think I mentioned this at the top, but I may have forgotten. So this is a live Facebook thread, and certainly if you have a question, we'll try to address that during the show. So I don't know if there's any questions in there yet. I'll check again, but I just want to encourage the audience to put in any questions. We're talking primarily about E2 because of the business angle, but and you've mentioned it, but just to be clear for anybody who's watching this, if the whole immigration process is essentially halted, so green cards right now are not being processed, correct?
Right. So there's basically two steps to most type of immigration cases. There's a lot of both non-immigrant classifications, such as an E2 treaty investor and others, and then there's immigrant classifications. For both of those, USCIS, which is the agency here in the United States, they process all the petitions and applications. So that's still in effect. They're still operating. They're still processing petitions and applications, but they are not open to the public. So if you're an immigrant or foreign national, applying for either a non-immigrant or immigrant benefit, they're still processing your application. But if you're required to have an in-person interview, then your case will be delayed because the local offices are all closed, or the district offices, nationwide are all closed. The second step is for foreign nationals seeking either non-immigrant or immigrant visas who are overseas. Because of the closure of all the U.S. embassies and consulates worldwide, they've already been delayed. And as I said, they've been closed since mid-March, so that's already a month and a half that they've been closed. So if you take that and then look at the presidential ban, you're adding 60 more days. So it's already at least 4 months, probably much longer, of a delay for people that are already in process applying for visas. And we don't know how long that's going to last. As I said, we're hoping a lot of the government agencies, including the embassies, the USCIS offices, will reopen at some point in May. But it seems like they keep extending that, certainly based upon COVID-19 and how it's affecting each state and so forth.
So do you have did we already show your slide? I know you have a slide. Did you show that, or you need to pull that up?
Yeah, if we could put that up, that would be great. As I said, our office
is
in Celebration, Florida.
So Christina, pull that slide up. And then pull me out, and then Damian, you talk to the slide real quick. Steve and I will come back in. We'll wrap this up with some questions and conversation. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our slide up there for our law firm, as I said, we're located in Celebration, and we also have our main office in Melbourne, Florida. Our law firm practices Florida law and federal law, and please feel free to give us a call if you have any immigration or any other legal issues. Thank you.
Pull me up. And Steve too, please. Yeah. So, Steve, you heard a little bit more, and I know we've talked with Damian leading up to this event, but any further comments, or as you maybe have followed the thread, anything you want to address?
No, I think the only thing I would ask you is, we need to get the E2 business owners to step forward really and try and help us with some of these bills. Visa legislation or any legislation is difficult to change. You know, that E2 visa has been around since the 1950s. It really, really does need an overhaul. You know,
I would add.
The only thing
Go ahead, Steve. Sorry,
go on, Demian.
I would just add to that as you said, it's important for all of the business owners here on E2s to, you know, make their story known, because even, you know, as a member of AILA, and we're pushing for all these changes to the regulations, Congress won't listen to us unless the people out there are showing and explaining how they're affected. We need the examples. We need everyone to step up, sign the petition, support the movement, you know, however they can.
Absolutely. All we're looking for is we're not looking for preferential treatment. You know, we're just looking for a fair shake.
Exactly.
You know, at the moment, the only time we get permanent status is for tax.
Right.
You know, this is our global tax base. You know, we don't get anything from the state. We don't get a break on anything. We're just looking for a fair shake. You know, we brought our families here. We're building our lives here. But we need these E2 business owners to step up and take part.
Right. So the last thing I forgot to mention real quick, John, if you don't mind, is
yes, sir.
So the biggest concern with the executive order is we don't know what Trump will do. He's very enforcement minded. He's very immigration restrictive minded. And the fear is that he will continue to extend this ban for multiple months. This might only be a stepping stone. You know, he might extend continually, and he might add other visa classifications. He might add non-immigrants to this order in the future. And that's a big concern for businesses and companies who employ, you know, foreign workers as professionals, agricultural workers, investors, etc.
Yeah.
And let me, sorry, Steve, so if we go back to President Obama's administration, he did several executive orders. And I guess what struck me from my little exposure to this debate at the federal level was that really created probably more confusion because it's not permanent law. And so you don't know whether you jump in or you stay out or how quickly it'll change on you. And so can you talk to that real quick?
Yeah, you know, so that's the issue. Well, the first issue is whether or not the presidents have the power through executive orders to even you know, change these regulations or create these new benefits or pathways. And then, of course, you know, the issue with Obama is he did create through executive order the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And that's a great program because it's the same, kind of the same situation that Steve is in with his daughter. You know, DACA was for all these children who were brought over at a very young age and, you know, have lived most of their lives here in the United States, and without DACA had no way to remain here legally, obtain a driver's license, go to college, be a productive member of society, etc. And because it's only an executive order, once Trump took office, he immediately tried to eliminate DACA. And of course, thankfully, a lot of the federal courts have allowed DACA to continue to some extent, but it's, you know, there's no new eligibility for people who weren't previously on DACA. So it hasn't been expanded. There's no pathway to a green card for, you know, these children or students who are on DACA. So they're in a stuck situation also, as John's daughter would be. They're allowed to remain here continually and temporarily without a pathway to a green card, but we don't know for how long. It's really going to depend on Congress whether or not you know, they pass a regulation that would give a pathway to a green card, or you know, another presidential executive order that would extend or expand the program. So we'll have to wait and see.
Steve, you had a comment before. You want to finish?
Yeah, I mean, I just picked up on one of the threads or one of the posts. I mean, we do have such a role to play in the economy. I mean, the employment we create, and hopefully it's starting to get recognized. The SBA form for PPP that was issued, you know, prevented us from being able to apply for it. But within 24 hours, we got a change on that SBA form, you know. So at a national level, we got a change. in the Small Business Administration, because they recognize the vital role that we do have as E2 business owners, in creating it.
So let me ask Demian real quick from the thread. We have a couple of questions. One is from our friend Zoe Adams. Can I ask if there's any hope for those on E2 visas who are stuck out of the U.S. after going back to renew their visas, whether they can get their passports back in time to fly back? So is there any hope for those stuck out of the country, like our friend Kevin?
Yes, certainly. Even though the embassies and consulates are closed, they are open for emergency services. So if this gentleman did have an emergency and needed to come back to the United States, medical emergency, family emergency, it may be possible for him to still apply and get the visa, but it would be very difficult. So number one, we have to wait and see when everything reopens, dependent upon the COVID-19 outbreak. And then number two, for a non-immigrant such as an E2, they're not going to be affected by the presidential ban. There's no suspension for them. It's only for the immigrant classifications, for family and employment-based immigrants. So the E2s would not be affected by the presidential ban, unless, as I said, after the first 60 days, maybe President Trump will try to expand the ban, maybe add E2s, maybe add non-immigrant visas, maybe increase the time of the ban. And that's, what we're hoping he won't do. So we'll have to wait and see.
So we're going a little over time. Another question from Paul Wallace. For E2 submissions in process since February, pending no further extension of order, should we expect that once the embassy in London returns, that they will reach out to establish whether the E2 business is still valid?
Yeah, so if you're in process, and certainly through London, they pre-adjudicate E2 applications, and then once they finish their adjudication, they call the applicants in for the visa interview. As I said, it's just a simple matter of delay. Due to COVID-19, you're looking at least 2 months, maybe as high as 4 months, 6 months for everything to get back to normal. So you're just going to have to wait your turn in line. All interviews were previously canceled and will need to be rescheduled. And then any new applications will fall in behind them. And you're just going to have to wait your turn in line until the embassy reaches out and tells you that they're reopened and an interview will be available. So that's just a time delay.
And another quick question. Well, I have a question from the thread, but Steve, let me ask you, and I maybe should have vetted this, but I'm sure the answer is the same. It's my flag droops. Do you employ American citizens?
Absolutely. It's one of our requirements on the visa.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
We do.
An important distinction as well, as you've come here and put it all on the line and invested. And the argument in the immigration circles sometimes is, they're taking our jobs, and yet you're doing the absolute reverse and providing jobs.
Yeah, and that's one of the main requirements for an E2 visa, is that the investment can not only be used to sustain the investor and his family. They do have to hire U.S. workers and create jobs. Otherwise, they will not, see extensions or renewals in the future. So that's a very important requirement.
So Kevin, our friend who we used his example, applied in the thread that they will not give an emergency appointment. He's tried twice, just as an FYI. And Tracy Hayes has a question. Great information. Will the drop in revenue due to COVID affect future renewals? Any thoughts on that?
Well, the whole purpose of the executive order suspending immigration or the immigration ban is based on jobs and revenue. They don't want a huge influx of immigrants coming in and competing with American workers for whatever jobs become available, once the quarantines are over and once businesses are operating as normal. So certainly, revenue has a lot to do with that. We have to wait and see, how many businesses are able to recover after COVID-19. How many businesses have closed, and how long the ban lasts. How many immigrants are going to be prevented from coming in, and will that help, U.S. workers get back to work sooner? There's arguments for both positions.
So, Damian, I think that question was aimed more at that renewal process. If we're going to renewals, then we have to prove, the business is trading and how it's performing. The concern is whether or not that drop in revenue would impact a renewal decision?
We certainly hope not. I would hope that the adjudicators would take the whole COVID-19 situation into consideration, because certainly we have a lot of E2, L1, EB5 clients who own and operate businesses here for investment purposes. And some of them have had to furlough employees and certainly close their doors. And certainly technically, they're in violation of their status to some degree. But we hope that immigration will take that into consideration, especially because, the quarantines are ordered by the governments, by the state typically. If you're not essential, you're not supposed to be open and operating. So certainly that should be in consideration when, E2 applicants or any non-immigrants go back to renew their visas. As a lawyer, I would certainly make those arguments on behalf of my clients.
So let me turn this real quick as we begin to wrap up. And I want to thank Widerman Malek for participating today, but also for being a chamber member. I want to thank Bardell Real Estate for being a chamber member. You talked to Demian about the Lawyers Association you're in that's been fighting for this. Steve, you have a group that's been fighting for this. The chamber's aim is advocacy. So, Steve, I'm going to ask you to give a testimonial about all your friends who might join the chamber and strengthen our voice. But I want to ask both of you how we can continue to work together to try to make things right in this topic.
Well, I've been a member of the chamber for probably 15 years now, and it really, the one thing that I've found with the chamber is we get that support, we get that business environment where we can reach out, we can talk to each other. And it all comes down to people. We've got to network, we've got to communicate, we've got to work with each other. We can change it. That's the one thing I have learned from with the Four Corners Council and the work we do on the area council, is that we can make a difference. But you've got to stand up. You've got to participate. If you're going to sit back and wait for somebody else to do it, guys, it's not going to happen. And I think the chamber's provided a great environment for us to get that engagement. Moving forward, I'd love to see the chamber support the E2 visa reform so we can get this up to Tallahassee, so we can talk to the Florida Chamber of Commerce. This is not an immigration issue for me. This is business, this is investment, this is job creation. It's what the country needs, even more so at this time than any other. So, maybe this is the start, and we can get this movement moving through the Chamber of Commerce. You guys have got access. It's difficult for us to find E2 business owners. I'd love if the chamber could put something out to our existing members and say, okay, please register and let us know if you're on an E2 visa. That'd be a great way for us to start the process.
Very good. Damian, you want to talk about the association, how we might work together?
Yeah, certainly. I certainly think more activities such as this, any way that we can reach the public and explain the issue and try to get everybody to come together. As Steve said, the more people, the more citizens that get involved, the more citizens that contact their local senator, congressman, work through the chamber. That's the best way to make the issue known and hopefully to affect change in the future.
And I see people are watching from around the world. Kevin's watching from London, and we just had a comment from Montana. So while we're certainly leading on educating this topic, encourage you to get engaged in your local communities where they can help too. But there are processes to follow. So it's not just John Newstreet wants to do this, and so we're going to get it done. I've got to put it to my government advisory committee, and we put it by our board of directors, and then it moves forward. So it does take a lot of people working together and make things happen, as Steve and Damian have said. And so this is certainly, I think, a start on that path. So with that, if you have any parting comments, if not, I'll turn it to Steve first, and then Damian for any parting comments.
No, just thank you to John and the chamber for giving us this opportunity to at least get our voice out there on E2 and be heard. We really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, John, thank you, and thanks to the chamber. This has been a great opportunity. Certainly, all the lawyers here at Widerman Malek are always interested and available to speak to the public. We appreciate the opportunity to help educate, promote business here in Osceola County. Thank you.
Yes, appreciate you both again. The last comment said, can the chambers work together? There was someone from the South Chamber, Tampa. And so the short answer is yes. I sit on the statewide board of the Florida Association of Chamber Professionals. And so while that organization doesn't do advocacy, it does professional development. We do interact with each other. And so there's a lot of collaboration to the best of our ability. And so I'll follow up on that, with others. And if you have a contact in your chamber that wants to reach out to me, encourage you to make that happen. The one thing that I can stress listening to this and following this topic is, we're little old Kissimmee, Florida, but we're a global economy. Right? We have folks from all over the world that not only invest and build our economy locally, but obviously when things are going great, we have visitors from all over the world make that impact too. And so that global aspect should be recognized and really strengthened. And so as we survive COVID-19 and come out of it, I think that's a very strong point for all of our business owners to take advantage of, is that we in Kissimmee, Florida are truly a global economy. So with that, we'll say thanks again to our speakers. Thanks for being partners. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you all.
Stay safe.
Take care.